He was a magician with a basketball, a showman ahead of his time, a player so electrifying, so unconventional that the game had to catch up to him. Before flashy crossovers and deep three-pointers were the norm, before the NBA embraced the art of showtime, there was Pistol Pete Maravich, a legend who rewrote the rules, played with a style no one had ever seen, and left behind a story as incredible as his game. This is the story of a prodigy, a pioneer, and the price of greatness. This is the legend of Pistol Pete. Born on June 22, 1947 in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, Pete Maravich was raised in a household where basketball wasn't just a game, it was a way of life. His father, Pres Maravich, was a coach, a visionary, and Pete's greatest teacher. From the moment Pete could walk, he had a basketball in his hands. And by the time he was a teenager, he wasn't just good, he was obsessed. While other kids played for fun, Pete practiced for greatness. Hours upon hours, dribbling through his legs while riding a bicycle, shooting in the dark until his hands were raw. It wasn't just dedication, it was destiny. By the time Pete reached high school, he was already a local legend. But no matter how many points he scored, how many jaw-dropping moves he pulled off, there was one man who expected even more, his father. And so when it came time to choose a college, there was no question where Pete would go: LSU. Not because it was a powerhouse, far from it, but because Pres Maravich had just become the head coach. Together, father and son weren't just aiming to win games. They were aiming to change the game itself. From 1967 to 1970, Pete Maravich didn't just play basketball. He performed. He dazzled. He did things with a basketball no one had ever seen before. He was an artist, and the court was his canvas. 3 seasons, 3,667 points, an NCAA record that still stands. No three-point line, no shot clock, just pure, unstoppable skill. Pete didn't just score, he entertained. He turned every game into a spectacle, every play into a masterpiece. This is only the beginning of the legend of Pistol Pete Maravich. The legend of Pistol Pete Maravich didn't end when he left LSU. It was only just beginning. In 1970, the most electrifying player in college basketball was ready for the next chapter, the NBA. With the 3rd pick in the NBA draft, the Atlanta Hawks took a chance on a player unlike any they had ever seen. Pete Maravich wasn't built for the structured physical game of the pros. He was built for the impossible, for the spectacular. And from the moment he stepped onto the court, he made sure everyone knew it. Just take a listen to what some of the greatest in the NBA have to say about Pistol Pete's game and how great he really was.
I would like to put Pistol Pete at 2, because for me, he was the first, no offense, Brent, he was the first white guy with style and flair that I've seen. So
why would I take offense to that comment?
Because you're a white guy. You're the first white guy to have the flash and style and between the legs and behind the back. I mean, because my every move was the move he did to Jerry West.
Pete Maravich, he would take the basketball, right? And he would fake the pass. He would bounce it here, bounce it behind him, fake the pass, and you as a defender would jump, and he'd turn back around, catch the ball, and shoot. That was a hell of a move. And I was like, okay, I got to try this. So I tried it in the game, and Steve Coulter stole it.
But the master of improvisation was the man known as the Pistol, Pete Maravich, who was turning the court into his own personal stage.
Pistol was like a guy, the game was boring to him, so he had to create things to keep him interested.
Pete just has so much razzle-dazzle in his game. He was just hard to guard.
way he handled the basketball so flippantly and so sort of carelessly really offended a lot of basketball purists.
What Pistol would do, he would take the ball and set it behind his back, catch the ball, and shoot. That was sweet.
He was a true entertainer, and I think he looked at entertainment more than basketball.
He used his basketball as a form of self-expression, and one of the real leaders in bringing basketball into this sort of area of artistry. It was like his form of art.
Boy, could he play basketball and could he entertain you. You know, the no-look passes, the dribble the ball and then pat it with one hand. That's where I saw that from Pistol Pete. That's where I got it from.
It was like the ball was an extension of him. He could shoot it from deep. He could take it in. He could wrap it around. I mean, he was doing stuff that you never saw. You know, and you never see a white boy doing that on top of that. This is a white boy I'm talking about. This ain't a brother, but he must have had some brother in him because he was a dazzler.
My head is in a bad place.
I always said, man, that ball looks like a part of his hand. And I said, he must spend a lot of time dribbling and and able to shoot the way he can shoot.
I don't think that the people, the fans now know how really great Pistol Pete was. He was probably my most difficult opponent as far as one-on-one. I saw Earl, the Pearl. I played against Clyde, and I thought those guys gave me problems. Pistol was unique with his ball handling and dribbling and stuff like that. He could just trick guys, and he gave me probably the most difficult time guarding. Isn't as physical as a Clyde or Earl, but Pete just has so much razzle-dazzle in his game. He was just hard to guard.
Pete was a showman. Played the game with a tremendous flair.
When you look at Jason Williams, you think of Pistol Pete.
Pete was a globetrotter. You know, Pete practiced this stuff, you know, day in and day out, and it was honed in. And Pete had a fire about him.
Looking at some of these little guys here, they probably never saw Pistol Pete play. I hope they look on YouTube. Tell them who Pistol Pete was.
Woo! You know, in college, Pistol and I fought for the scoring leader in the country. And all 3 years I was second to Pistol. And I used to make excuses. The only reason Pistol scored more than me is because his dad coached him and so on and so forth. Until I got to play against him. And that was a lot of baloney. He was, goodness gracious. It's hard to describe somebody that was about 6'6", 6'7", handle the ball as well or better than myself. He just didn't shoot the basketball. He was a pure shooter. Yeah. He would pass the ball through the eye of a needle. I got a chance to play with him for the first time in the high school All-American game in Memphis. And it's tough. You trying to play your game and you're watching him. Yeah. You know, you're in the backcourt with him. We were starting guards for the All-American team. And I got to be great friends with him from that point on.
I can remember when Pete got traded from Atlanta, where he started his career, over to New Orleans when the team went down there in his expansion team. And they had never won a game. They were 0-14, and they were the worst team in the league. And Otto Moore was the center. They couldn't do anything, but Pete was just lighting them up. And the Portland Trailblazers, we go in there, we had a team, and it was not the championship team, but we had a good enough team. And we were pounding them early, way up at halftime, and Pete in the second half just takes over, and he goes absolutely wild. He's playing 1 against 5, and he's up and down the court, shooting jumpers, hooks, full court behind the back passes through guys' legs. He does everything, and at the very last play of the game, we're up 1, and Pete dribbles up. 4 of our guys go chase him because they know he's not going to pass it, and he's falling out of bounds, and he shoots it as he's tumbling over the row of fans in the corner.
Literally.
And I am standing underneath the basket waiting for the last rebound of the game. We're going to win the game, and they're not going to win a game ever, the New Orleans Jazz. And the ball swishes perfectly through the net. He's unbelievable. And he reminds me a lot, if you can compare him to anybody, to Steve Nash today, although Pete was much bigger. Pete was 6'5", and much more athletic in terms of the jumping ability until he tore his knee up. I mean, that really changed everything for Pete. And amazing about Pete, 44 points per game, career, for 3 straight years in an era with no three-point line. Dale Brown, who coached at LSU after Press and Pete were there, Dale Brown went back and charted all the games with the running score. You know, Maravich free throw, Maravich 22-foot jumper, Maravich layup. And he calculated it with the current college three-point rule at 19.9. Pete Maravich would have averaged 13 three-point makes per game, which would have given him a career average of 57 points per game under today's rules. That guy is unbelievable. We love him. We miss him terribly. What a great friend. What a great friend.
The time has come for Honor Roll to unveil the greatest player of all time. Pistol Pete Maravich of LSU. Sporting floppy socks and a flashy style, Maravich averaged over 44 points per game. But more impressively, he created a hoops frenzy at a school long known only for football.
I think one of the toughest sells in America was to sell basketball in Louisiana.
It wasn't until Pete showed up on campus and started playing that word spread like wildfire that here was a bona fide superstar.
As soon as he touched the ball, people went to the edge of their seat. You were scared to take your eye off of him because something might happen.
It was as if you had melted down all 12 Harlem Globetrotters and then filled up this skinny 6'6" white frame with everything they had.
It looked like Ichabod Crane out there with a mop on his head or something. He didn't wear those gray floppy socks by accident. He knew that people would see him. He knew that he was selling the game.
I loved him at LSU. Socks flopping, he had flavor. They're like, wait a minute, where did this guy grow up? He had that something.
You were never quite sure what he was going to do with the ball in the open court because he had 1,000 moves to either shoot it or pass it.
Number 23, Pete Maravich.